Just have to wait for a little bit to make sure that there's folks on. Hey everybody, we're just gonna wait till a couple of people come on. We'll see if anybody comes on. Good morning from Melbourne. We're just gonna hang out for a second and just
cool.
give people a little time to know that we're here.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Okay, somebody's popped on. So, hey everybody, it is so great to be back. You might even recognize this space, even though it's a little nondescript, that I was here just in March interviewing Holly Hammond in Melbourne, Australia. We have us people who are not from here have a hard time saying Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's Melbourne, it's not Melbourne, FYI.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm Sage Hayes, and I'm so psyched to be here with Leah Avene. Yeah, nailed it. Good. And we're going to be doing our first in a series of 36 interviews for what used to be called Hive Live. We've now transitioned the name to the Interviews for Embodied Liberation. And that's just because that's what this whole project is about. It's about working with communities and healers and leaders and practitioners and artists of all types who are often on the margins doing really important collective healing work and kind of really helping to lift up voice and wisdom, leadership, and strategies, tools, and techniques for all of us, actually, so that we can kind of distribute healing and love and wisdom to everybody. And so we sort of have this whole thing where healing is for some people, depending on who you are or what access you have. And the Interviews for Embodied Liberation and the mission of this is that really how can we create more access for everyone, and also more information about even what is available and how are all the different ways that people can access themselves and community and ways to heal that are outside the mainstream. So I want to welcome you back. It's great to be here. I want to thank you for being the first in.
Exciting.
It is really exciting for kicking us off. I'm glad that this project's back online. Two more things to tell you before we start the interview. One is all of the 24 interviews are now up on YouTube and of the last series. So I will post that link shortly so you can watch any of them that you missed. And then the second thing is I have started a little bit of a fundraising campaign to support this project, because last time I completely funded it. I just did it, actually. And then wherever I was, I just interviewed people.
If you were feeding yourself and traveling, I'm pretty sure you funded it.
Exactly, totally. So I self-funded it on a shoestring, and that was awesome, and I felt really good about that. And I didn't ask for any support financially because I felt like, well, personally, I think I felt pretty insecure about the project. I wasn't sure if it was, I knew it was worth it, but I didn't know if it was worth enough to ask for support. And anyways, this time I've started a Patreon page where if you'd like to fund it for as little as $2 a month, you can. It's a really cool fundraising platform, so you can check that out at patreon.com/embodied liberation. So would love your support, and thank you so much in advance for that. So without further ado, really happy to be here, happy to see you all again, happy to meet you. I just got to Melbourne a couple of days ago. I get to travel and be a teaching assistant with the Somatic Experiencing Australia crew here. And like I said, while I travel, I try to find folks who really are doing really interesting work that I think other folks really, should hear about, actually. So thank you to Raquel Dubo. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. I just want to give her a shout out, first of all.
I met her in a comment thread.
Oh, in a comment thread?
Yeah.
On Facebook?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So thank you for connecting us. We really appreciate it. I have a feeling you might be watching this morning. And then followed up and checked out your stuff and your music. You're a storyteller, you're a poet, you're a community person, you're a mom. So there's so many different things. You're studying Gestalt. There's so many different things to talk about this morning. And I just want to say welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome.
And having this conversation with you.
Great. That's awesome. Great. So maybe we could just start off, if you want to just tell us a little bit about just a little bit about who you are and whatever you'd like to share with folks so that they can get a little bit of a context.
Yeah.
And I forgot to tell you before, if you want to just speak up just a little bit, so that the sound goes through.
Yes. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'm I think I'll start with mother. I've been a mother since I was 19. I have 2 daughters. And I'm a musician. I've been doing that since I was 12. And writing my own music. And I'm also very interested in my own journey, which I started out as thinking was a mental health journey. And now I see it as a decolonizing journey. So, what else do I do? I'm a broadcaster at community radio. I've been doing that for 3 years on a show called All Our Stories, which I co-host with Jess Fairfax. And we look at getting music, bringing in music and poetry as a starting point to talk about people's stories and their culture, their identity, all the intersections between all of their identities, histories, truth, the search for it. And it has profoundly changed me as a person, because when I started, I didn't really know, this sounds so silly, but I think you will understand, you might understand what I mean. So when I started it, I didn't know what it meant that I was a mother. I didn't know what it meant that I was brown, that I was female, that I was queer, am. I didn't know what that meant in the world. And I think what's happened is the more I have heard people's stories and been emboldened by the hearing of them and the content, the more I've realized how I'm not crazy. I am struggling. I am hurting in a world that does not value the things that I am. And so I used to see the world in this way where I was like trying to get to a place where I was successful or just enough, and even in that, I was still working in community and environment, and it wasn't, I wasn't like working at a bank or anything, but I really felt like I wanted this success, or that I needed to become enough. And I think in hearing the stories of the people who have sat across the console from me and being exposed to all these other communities, I've realized that the problem is out there in the system and not internally in me. That probably, definitely, I have worth, and it exists apart from any of the things that I do or say that I am or achieve. And that, each way that I've learnt that I am oppressed, or I've learnt that I have had power taken away from me, I have also, the flip side of that has been stepping into immense power of knowing that and then valuing that. And then I think I'm in a place in my life where I'm figuring out how I'm going to include that in all of the work that I do. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's such, sounds like you sort of thought maybe it was, you were going in for one thing, like work or your life was one thing, and that and it sounds like through being, so on your, all of our stories, the radio show that you co-host, through hearing people's stories, and then having them resonate with you or having them contrast with you, even like just touch you, that really sort of has continued to more like rearrange how you see everything, and then also your experience of yourself and your power, your personal power, your personal agency, your sense of worth is contextualized within a totally different way. And that makes me think about one of the first things you said, which I just wanted to touch in on, which I think is connected to everything you just said, which is you started on a journey of mental health, and then that turned into decolonization, a journey of decolonization. And is that, and is your process with the radio show connected to that too, or was that kind of different?
Oh, no. I mean, it's absolutely through music and radio. I mean, I didn't even have language for a lot of my experience. And just through the research, I do before I interview people, and I mean, I've just really kind of become very hungry for this. So I think probably even the decolonizing thing might be very recent. Like even this last year, I've had lots of different names for it, but decolonizing for me, it fits in a way because it affects everything. It impacts the way I think about the environment, my relationship with myself, my relationship with others. You know, I feel like it all all of the ways that I want equality kind of all come back to this idea of that we were colonized and we have been colonized. My body's colonized, my thought is colonized. And as I take away the layers of that misinformation, I find, you know, my own, truth and power. So it's not a perfect word, but it's the word that I'm using now because it fits. And the English language is so limited. And so I'm calling it decolonizing because it encompasses everything. And not just I as an individual have mental health problems that I need to fix. We as a collective have structural problems which we need to address. And everybody's liberation is connected to everybody else's, you know?
Yes.
Oh, what a relief, right?
Well, it changes everything.
Yeah, it really does.
You know, it kind of flips the script and it takes it out of our sort of personal bits, and it contextualizes it in a more honest way. And I think it really helps myself and so many other people. I think with just the individual sense of, oh, there's something wrong with me, it's like it never really goes away because structurally it never really goes away. All of the institutional and historic trauma which has been, you know, continues to divide and conquer. Until that is addressed, we're not gonna stop feeling that, you know. So how are we building strength and resilience in our individual bodies, but then also across difference and with each other, to be able to have a language, right, that sort of busts open the English language, which, you know, is tricky with these things. The language of dominance we've all internalized, and oppression, and to create some agency to, you know, think about mental health, think about health, vitality, you know, community health really differently. Yeah. If there's if there are some folks watching out there who maybe have sort of been like thinking in the framework of mental health and have been like trying and have felt like this whole idea of structural and decolonization really resonates, like, but if they were sort of maybe at the beginning of their path around like kind of waking up to this, do you have any like advice or anything to share with them?
Oh,
and I know it's like a big question.
That's huge. Well, I think repetition is one of the most, you know, valuable things. So I haven't had a like, you know, life-changing moment. I've had many small life-changing moments.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's such a good point.
So, what changes that? I mean, for me, I think it's quite personal.
Yeah.
Because for me, I have the strength of my ancestry. I'm Tuvaluan, which is a small nation in the South Pacific, made up of 9 atolls. And I was born there, and I left my language there when I came here, which was really tragic. But I have that to draw on. So on my dad's side, so my dad's Tuvaluan, and our connection to land and each other and culture and song and dance and body is so alive. It has been colonized, but it is still alive, and it's alive in me, and even my children who have never visited there, it is alive in them. So I need only to go back to my birthplace to connect with that. There are many, many complexities with that, and with being someone, you know, straddling, you know, several cultures, but home's not very far away from me on my dad's side. On my mother's side, she's Irish settler Australian. Her grandparents came here, great-grandparents, sorry, on both sides, similar. And for her, you know, her connection to land, culture, song, you know, self is so many thousands of years back. you know. For me to find my maternal songs and stories and what it means for me to be Irish is so far away because it has been disrupted and by the church. It has been I don't even know how to start that journey. So I have a huge amount of empathy in my heart for people who are white, who have so far back, you know, who have to look so far back for that place. And I value that connection, you know, some people don't value that connection. So yeah, I don't know. So that's why I'm saying it's quite personal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It is quite personal. And there's also this sort of, you know, collective archetypal doorway we all have into our lineage. And I hear you saying, like, you know, because generationally you were born on, you know, the island of your father's lineage, and that sort of dynamic aliveness, connectedness to that felt sense of culture, song, practice, being, way of being, right? Yep. That is just deeply innately connected to the land and probably the sea, and who you are is so close to your being, you know, and then the distance of your Irish ancestry. And I like to think, you know, as I work more and more with people working with trauma and also doing some interesting lineage work with family constellations, it's really exciting to start exploring, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this, like exploring the possibility, even if it is 500 years back and there's a whole shit show in between of
clusterfuck, yeah,
of trauma and forced migration, and, you know, war and, you know, collective conflict. There's really interesting ways I think we're starting to explore about how to be able to travel back to a time when that culturally our families and our cultures were more intact, and that on some level there's this possibility that and I think so much about this with trauma, like innately there's a part of that's always still intact. Yeah. Like that there's that
because
knowing,
we are.
Exactly, because we're
alive.
That's right.
We are a testament to the fact that our ancestors did something.
Yes.
Like loved us or life itself enough to keep going, you know.
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's right. Like phenomenal resilience, survival, power, strength, all of the things. Yeah. Faith, all the things that might go into that. Yeah. And then being able, and I wonder, like, song and poetry and storytelling and the things that you're really, you know, creating, how those bring us back. Like, I'm just kind of curious with song or storytelling, like, what you notice in your audiences or the people who you share with, like, or even yourself personally or your children, like, what ways those can help people sort of feel a bridge, more of a bridge.
Well, I think there's something profoundly exciting and powerful about just speaking your story out loud. Because I think so many of the stories that we have about ourselves get caught in a loop in our head, and they're quite negative, just from everyday, you know, from everyday stories to the long story of who we are. And so for me, you know, this interview's happening at a really interesting time for me because you know, we've got this beautiful sunny day today, but it has been a long, dark Melbourne winter. Politically, Australia is just breaking many, many hearts, as it always does. And a lot of people have been suffering, and I've been suffering a lot. And I'm just sort of starting to come out of it as the weather does, but also one of the things that has really changed for me is, you know, is performing and speaking my story. And each time that I do it, I get this strength in my backbone because I get to choose the way that I am telling the world about myself. I don't even care how it lands a lot of the time. It just feels so important for me to tell it. And I'm really interested in narrative healing and poetry and music because they work so beautifully together. So I think poetry dismantles and messes with the English language, if it's in English. If it's in other languages, oof, I don't even know, but it's so, love hearing poetry in other languages. Because you feel it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I don't know, there's no, my brain's not
visceral.
following. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so poetry messes with, you can mess and warm up and reshape the English language with poetry in a way that, you know, it can include so much more. It can move away from this dominance and from this competitive, scarce, you know, feeling of scarcity, and there's not enough and we all have to fight over scraps. Like, there's something about the English language that just keeps perpetuating that. And when I think about poetry and when I think about what I love listening to and what I love writing, I feel like it lifts it to a new place. And then when I sing, or you know, tell a story, I think the amazing thing is it just bypasses your brain and it hits you in your body. And I think our bodies hold a lot of our colonized experience, but I think our brains really trip us up, the way that we interpret and judge things. And, you know, a lot of people cry when they come to my shows. A lot of people cry because the stories that I'm telling are not just, they don't just belong to me, they're so common. And it feels so good to hear someone say it out loud. And I've felt that for a long time, and yeah. I don't know if any of that made any sense.
Oh,
but
it totally made sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, and being able to create, like, just the natural, I mean, to me, you know, like, the center of that was when I tell my story. Like, when we tell our stories in a way that's like an offering to ourselves, you know, no matter how they land, and the whether it's through poetry or storytelling, and just what that offers, because it's like the essence. It can be the essence of liberation in telling our stories, because there's been so much power and control, and telling the simple act of telling a story can be about taking up space with body and mind and heart and soul. Yeah, and like
and
how,
claiming it.
Right, exactly.
Right, you know, and just living in my body in a different way, because it changes the way I see the world. If I'm able to, like, as a brown person and as a woman, the stories that I saw in the media, in the fairy tales, you know, there weren't people that looked like me. It didn't feel like much was possible for me when I was a child. What I felt was possible was for me to become as white as I could possibly be. It was like, I felt that there was this profound, like this severe deficit in me that I had to make up for. Right. So I love pleasing people. And
which is impossible.
Freaking out. Yeah, totally, right? And the more I realized that, you know, I don't have a deficit and I have nothing to make up for, and the more I can live in this body proudly or even just comfortably, you know, the easier it is to move it through the world and not be so overwhelmed and depressed and distressed and, you know.
I do. And a question about that, like, as you've come more into your body and into, like, you know, the authenticity of all of who you are and your identities and your cultural backgrounds, like, as there's been it sounds like a real power and strength in that, has there been also, I know sometimes when folks really come into their power, it sometimes makes life a bit less safe because people can be threatened.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of curious if that's been your experience at all too. I know I don't know why I want to ask that question, but
it's a funny thing, you know. I laugh a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I laugh so much. I'm unsure if I'm not yet bold enough in my bones to really confront people who are speaking untruths about me or others, or if I have a lot of empathy for people who do that, and I can laugh and charm and, you know, kind of maneuver my way through conversations in ways that make people less, you know, threatened and reactive. And I've been saying for years, I've been arguing. It's hilarious. My co-host and I have, you know, we speak on air and we chat to people and whatever. And when we're playing music off air, we have these massive arguments, and we both argue both sides of the argument, you know. And I've been saying for years, for example, you know, with white people and people of color, when a white person is confronted with their privilege, the person often that needs the most amount of support in that situation is the white person, or the man, or the, you know, like the dominant person often needs so much more support. The reaction of them is often violent and vile and dangerous and damaging. But, I mean, I look at my children and I know at their worst, they need the most love. When they're tired, when they hear no, when they don't get what they want, you know, when they are being so nasty to each other, that is when they need all of my love and patience and tenderness and presence. And I say that and I mean it, but it's so fucking hard to do.
I imagine there's a lot of people
like, please think me not a model mother, because it is hard. Ooh. But I know that about them. And I also, if I look at people as children, which I often try to do, because we are all impacted by this world, we have all been conditioned, you know, again, using the example of whiteness, as we turn towards white, everybody learns whiteness. As we turn towards it, we turn away from everything else. And if you don't know what everything else is, you won't grieve it necessarily in the same way as I do, because I know I have a felt sense of you know, of what that means. But yeah, I don't know what you think, but that idea that so much support needs to be given to the person who's been confronted. And that is controversial, because activists will tell me to shut the fuck up. How dare I? They need to be clubbed over the head with a bat. And I want to do that all the time.
Yeah. No, I actually, I mean, I love this conversation and this particular piece, because as somebody who studies the nervous system, right? Like, so many people who are in the non-dominant group or facing oppression, a lot of us are masters at tend and befriend, right? At like, let's just like, you know, like that is a physiological strategy for survival. That's a protective response. You know, a lot of people may think we're being nice, and we are being nice, but there's also a real protective strategy, and that is if we can neutralize the situation and actually maybe create some authentic type of, conscious thing around power, then there's something positive and constructive that can happen. And it doesn't mean that underneath that response isn't fear, for me, you know? And so I think there's a generosity and a capacity to folks who can offer tend and befriend. Like, I'm really good at it. You know, people think I'm really nice, and that is true. I am very nice. And I mean it, I got a big heart. But, like, I think early on, as a differently gendered person, I learned to really sort of navigate in a way so that I wasn't... I mean, we have a physiological programming to not get kicked out of the herd, you know? And so we often will do everything we can to stay safe, you know? So when we're tending and befriending, it doesn't mean we're not inhibiting a fair amount of adrenaline that either wants to run away or fight, you know? And I think with marginalized people, that is part of what the burden of our bodies that, you know, many generations have been managing, which is why we see so many extreme health indicators with cancer and heart disease and chronic fatigue and things like that, because the amount of oppression and unprocessed rage and unprocessed hopelessness that we have to carry because we have to tolerate the structural situation, you know, whether we tend and befriend or fight, like, we're still having to live with the incongruence of the inequity, you know? And to me, it's like, how are we caring for that, you know?
How are we caring for, I mean, so I've spent the last probably 2 months, maybe 6 weeks, pretty much in bed. I did an album preview, which felt really important to me. I've stayed at the radio. One of my jobs I haven't been able to go to. Just anywhere where there's a lot of pressure. My tolerance for the world is so low at the moment. And so I have been sleeping. And sleeping and sleeping and sleeping. And I haven't even been doing a good enough job of like taking care of myself in that, but it's been huge for me to let myself, just even give myself permission to do that.
Yeah. And it's, and I'll just, add in there that, of course, that totally makes sense. There's a lot going on here politically in Australia, never mind kind of walking through the world as a brown person. And, I'm sure there's many other things of why you're like sleeping. And then if I think about, working with, people who are subject to such intensity, it's like, even when we sleep and sleep and sleep, are we getting good enough rest? Because it's hard to down-regulate, we call it in physiology, but it's hard to downshift our system out of fight-flight mode into a truer type of restorative rest. And it's like we can go to sleep in fight-flight mode, but it doesn't mean we're getting that like healthy sleep. And it's like, and then it's like until we can kind of, and those are the cultural sort of rituals or ways that we have to, I think, just keep thinking about how we support ourselves individually and together to be able to number one, normalize sleeping for weeks. Normalize the fight-flight response, but also be able to help just support people where they are and maybe create an understanding and also create some new tools and strategies for helping people who maybe get stuck in those.
Yeah, I think what's really tricky is that it's so valuable in this. We live in a culture where it's like a badge of honor, to be so busy. So for the last year, I've worked 3 jobs and studied and had 2 kids. Mostly, I'm the mum, so I'm, do all of the emotional, all of the things. And moved house about 9 times, I think, and And I tell people that I'm busy, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know." Like it's like it's cool to be busy. We value being busy, right?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who has a chronic illness told me in a hushed tone. I said, "What have you been up to? Blah blah blah, you studying?" And she told me in a hushed tone that she'd taken time off work because she really wants to, heal, and have some space. And I teared up. I felt so happy to hear her say that. Every time someone says publicly, part of therapy is a safe space to speak the unspeakable, right? Like, I want to be able to talk about these things. I want to be able to tell people that, my children for the last 3 weeks have lived at their dad's house, which is it was such a hard decision to make because I just needed sleep so much and rest.
Totally.
And this idea of self-love is this revolutionary, radical act.
Totally.
It's just so needed. I even feel a bit tired thinking about all of the weariness in the world,
Of course. How could you not? Yeah, and even in that tiredness, being able to just hold the warmth of self-love. Right.
Yeah.
Right where each of us is.
Yeah.
And just without having to go on to the next thing, the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just sit with that. That's nice.
It's nice, isn't it?
So it's really nice.
That sweet taste of space.
I know, right? Yeah. It's like breaking a habit.
Yeah.
For me.
Definitely for me too.
Yeah.
Definitely. Every time, there's all these marvelous clues that our body gives us that we just have learnt to you know, not listen to or notice.
Yeah.
Every time I notice my throat tightening, you know, I think this is probably, this might not make sense, but when my kids were little, I used to have this saying, it's not about the shoes. Because they'd have tantrums, especially my little one, about shoes. It was all about shoes and where they were and who was touching them and whether they were on her feet and how they felt. And it was never about the shoes. It was tiredness or needing tenderness or, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's never about the shoes. So this feeling, it's never about the thing that is in front of me or the thing that I think it is or the urgency to make dinner or get to the next thing. It's just going, hey, 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 hey.
It's not about the shoes.
It's not about the shoes.
Yeah, I love that story.
I'm glad you get it.
It's so helpful.
Oh, I know, right? We're all just distressed children.
Yeah.
Dressed in adult clothing.
Totally.
You know, trying to make sense of this. And it's so amazing having children and being around children a lot. It's such a privilege because I notice their behavior in all the ways that it's still alive in me, you know?
Yeah, it's like humbling.
So humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I so appreciate you just being really authentic about it. You know, and transparent about your process as a mom and as a person.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could talk about, you know, theory and use academic language to prove, you know, these histories. But really, I just feel like it comes down to like my humanness. I think that speaks louder than anything else to people, you know?
I do.
I think we study, like we study and there's a lot of study around decolonizing and what actually happened throughout history and, you know, does intergenerational trauma exist and how does it, you know, all that kind of stuff. And people want proof, right?
Yeah.
People want to pin, that is a colonized thing.
Yeah,
they want to pin down and measure and
data,
categorize
research.
These ideas and these experiences. But really, at the end of the day, I'm just this human person, and I was born with a womb and an able body, and I've got brown skin, and I had kids when I was young for, you know, in white culture. And I have lived a lot of things. And when I tell people about them, you know, it loosens up a little bit of the rigidity of the way we relate and gives a bit more permission for other people to just be like, oh, yes, what the fuck?
Totally. Yeah. No, I think it's like when you're real and down to earth and a bit vulnerable, it definitely gives other people permission to be. It's like that little bit of like, okay, we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna attack each other. We're not gonna, or at least the idea is that, you know, okay, you know, you're a little safe and you're showing me your humanity and you're available on that level, which is, you know, a big part of what these interviews are all about, you know, which is about like, you know, getting real. It's like being together, taking time and, you know, and to me, it's like the fundamental aspect of any type of healing. I don't care if we're talking about healing arts within the colonist context or we're talking about healing arts and indigenous practices or roots. It's like presence and humanity and feels so integral. I love one of my teachers of family constellations, Francesca Mason Boring, talked about our resilience and our fragility like the other week. And I thought, oh, I've never heard those used in the same sentence. And I've been really just sitting with that recently, just like how we can honor both at the same time. Because usually it's like, we're resilient, you know? But then there's like fragility and the vulnerability of that. And how do they interplay, right?
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. I've been thinking a lot recently about intergenerational trauma and like, you know, it comes up a lot and I'm, you know, thinking about it and writing about it. And I just was thinking the other day about intergenerational love and that idea that, you know, a very wise woman, Gemma, who is a healer and an extraordinary person, said to me once when we were doing some healing work that, you know, I was coming up against this block, you know, and she said, imagine that every single ancestor of yours is watching you right now, and they are depending on you. They are cheering for you to do this difficult thing and face this thing they could not, and heal this thing they passed down to you and didn't want to. You know, they were just people and they couldn't, but you can, you know? Oh, and I think about that, and it makes so much sense. Like my Polynesian ancestors traveled from, right across the oceans and followed the stars and found these islands and made lives there, and then went to, it is so incredible that we survived, and another very wise woman, Rachel Edwardson, said to me recently, I was really struggling about racism and oppression, and it just feels so big sometimes. I feel so much weight on me when I think about the complexity and the largeness of the system that we live in. And she said, our people, she's Inupiaq from far North Alaska, have lived for thousands and thousands of years through famine and hurricanes and tidal waves and across oceans, and this blip of colonization is so small in our history.
That's amazing.
And we will live beyond this. Ooh. Ooh. Ooh.
Take that time. Yeah. I mean, there's not a word for that on some level. In English, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
We will live beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much hope in that.
So much hope in that.
And so much power and strength. And remembering of what folks have already lived through.
Yeah.
To kind of contextualize our overwhelm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, really.
Thank
you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'm sure a lot of people needed to hear that today. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really strong when I think about that.
Thank you so much for spending time talking with me and with folks out there who are going to watch this.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah.
I feel very moved.
Yeah, I feel very honored. Thank you. And thanks for just being a mom, not just being a mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just staying connected to, what is strong, deeply true in you and your lineages. And
I would say the same to you. I really appreciate this series, and I'm so excited about going back and watching them all. I think it will be such an education. And I think I have so much appreciation for people like yourself who, you were talking before about fragility and resilience, and you're putting yourself out there in the world in a body that I imagine is not always easy to live in. Like people, there is a cost. You're so bold and so brave, but there's a cost to that as well.
Definitely.
And every single activist and healer and person in the world that I see in the public realm doing this work and having these conversations, I just feel so tremendously grateful, because I see you and I see you pulling all of us forward, So I really appreciate you as well. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, may our words and love and wisdom just be medicine for all the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, anyone watching. I hope you can feel.
Yeah, no, they can feel it. Look, I already said thank you. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up? I mean, what we just did was so beautiful. Look at all the little love hearts. It's sweet.
Oh, no, I don't even know what, I'm speechless. It doesn't happen very often. This has been really beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah, this is the work, I believe, you know. Just sending so much love from here this morning.
Yes. Particularly in Australia right now, we are in such a awful place. The queer community, Indigenous community, so much love. And just to everyone, like, take care. Please take care. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever that means. Cool. All right, y'all, we'll see you at the next interview. I have no idea when or where or who or whatever, but it's going to be great. So I'll let you know. Have a great day or a great night wherever you are, and we'll see you soon. Big love.